My wife Melissa and I have been married for 8 years. We've always had what I thought was a good relationship. Solid communication, plenty of laughter, and dreams of a big family. The only thing missing was kids. For years, we tried. Doctor visits, tests, fertility treatments, you name it, we did it. Every month brought another heartbreak, and eventually, we started to accept that maybe parenthood wasn't in the cards for us. Then, out of nowhere, Melissa dropped a bombshell. It was a Friday evening. I'd just gotten home from work, tired and ready to crash on the couch. Melissa was in the kitchen, humming as she plated what looked like a fancy dinner. The whole setup felt a little too perfect. Candles, wine glasses, and even a small gift bag sitting on the table. "What's the occasion?" I asked, grinning. She smiled back, radiant and confident. "Sit down. I've got a surprise." As I sat, she handed me the gift bag. Inside was a tiny onesie that said Daddy's Little Miracle across the front. I froze, staring at it, and then looked up at her. She was beaming, tears in her eyes. "You're pregnant?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, and I swear, I've never felt anything like the rush of emotions that hit me in that moment. Relief, joy, disbelief, it all collided. I pulled her into a hug, holding her tight, and for the first time in years, I let myself believe that everything was finally falling into place. The next few days were a whirlwind. I couldn't stop smiling, and I started planning a baby shower immediately. Melissa laughed at my enthusiasm but seemed genuinely happy about it. Or so I thought. There were little things that should have stood out to me, even then. When I offered to go with her to her first prenatal appointment, she brushed it off, saying, "It's just a routine checkup. Nothing exciting." When I suggested we start shopping for baby furniture, she said it was too early. At the time, I chalked it up to her being cautious. After all, we'd been through so much trying to get here. But then there was the phone call. I'd just finished dinner and was cleaning up when I heard Melissa in the other room. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but I caught bits and pieces. "No, he doesn't suspect a thing." "Yes, I'm sure. Don't worry, I'll handle it." When she came back into the kitchen, she smiled like nothing was wrong. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "Rachel," she said without hesitation. "We were talking about ideas for the baby shower. You know how she loves planning these things." Something about her answer didn't sit right with me, but I pushed the thought aside. Melissa was my wife, the woman I'd spent nearly a decade building a life with. There was no reason not to trust her, right? Still, that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a tiny seed of doubt took root. It was the way she looked at me when I asked about the call. Just a split second of hesitation, like she was trying to gauge whether I believed her. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just overwhelmed by the sudden change in our lives. But looking back now, I realized that moment was the beginning of everything unraveling. Things started feeling off. Maybe it was the way Melissa seemed a little too relaxed for someone who had just announced life-changing news, or how she always had some reason for me not to join her for doctor's appointments. But I kept brushing it off. I wanted this baby, this dream, to be real so badly that I ignored the gnawing sense that something wasn't right. The first real crack came one Saturday afternoon. Melissa's best friend, Rachel, came over to help brainstorm ideas for the baby shower. Rachel is one of those people who can't keep a secret to save her life. Fun to be around, but not exactly subtle. While the two of them chatted in the living room, I hung back in the kitchen, figuring I'd give them space and pop in if they needed my input. As I was pouring myself a cup of coffee, I overheard Rachel say something that froze me mid-pour. "I just hope this doesn't get too messy for you," she said, her voice hushed but not quiet enough. "Rachel," Melissa hissed. "Shut up. David could hear you." That was all I caught before they realized I was standing there, my footsteps on the tile giving me away. Melissa's head snapped toward the kitchen door like a guilty kid caught sneaking cookies before dinner. Rachel turned beet red, stammering something about bathroom decorations. "What's messy?" I asked, keeping my tone light but direct. Rachel looked like she'd rather crawl under the couch than answer, but Melissa stepped in smoothly. "Oh, it's nothing," she said with a wave of her hand. Rachel's just being dramatic about some work drama she's caught up in. You know how it is. I wasn't buying it. Rachel couldn't even meet my eyes, which wasn't like her at all. Melissa, on the other hand, smiled as if nothing had happened, then quickly changed the subject. David, did you decide whether we're going with the jungle theme or the storks for the shower? I didn't push. Not yet. But as Rachel made her excuses and left not long after, I could see she was squirming, avoiding even a simple goodbye. That wasn't like her. At all. After Rachel left, I brought it up again. So, what was Rachel talking about? Melissa sighed, clearly annoyed. David, I told you, it's nothing. Rachel's just, well, she's been stressed lately. Her mouth runs before her brain catches up sometimes. You know that? I nodded slowly, trying to act like I was satisfied with her answer. But Rachel's words kept echoing in my mind. I just hope this doesn't get too messy for you. What did that mean? That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Rachel wasn't someone who'd say something like that lightly, especially not to Melissa. If it was just harmless work gossip, why did Melissa seem so eager to shut it down? Why did Rachel look like she wanted to bolt the second I asked about it? The doubts that had started to creep in before were now shouting at me. Something was wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that Melissa was hiding something, and Rachel knew what it was. As I lay in bed that night, watching Melissa scroll on her phone with a contented smile, I made a decision. If there was something going on, anything, I was going to find out. For now, I'd play along, act like the trusting husband who believed every word she said. But I'd just taken the first step down a road I couldn't turn back from. After that strange encounter with Rachel, I couldn't let it go. Something wasn't adding up. Melissa seemed so composed, almost too composed, and I started noticing little things I might have ignored before, like how her phone was suddenly glued to her hand, or how she kept brushing off my offers to help with anything baby-related. The first real crack came one evening when I was unloading the dishwasher. Melissa had left her purse on the counter, open just enough for me to see a pharmacy receipt sticking out. I wasn't snooping, at least that's what I told myself, but curiosity got the better of me. I slid the receipt out and saw it was for prenatal vitamins. Except here's the thing. The bottle of vitamins we bought together was still sitting in the pantry, unopened. I checked. That was the moment the nagging doubt turned into something I couldn't ignore. If she wasn't taking the vitamins, then what the hell was going on? I decided to keep my discovery to myself for the time being. I needed more. That night, while Melissa was in the shower, I took a chance and checked her phone. It was risky, but she wasn't exactly the type to bring her phone into the bathroom. I knew her passcode. She'd used the same one for years. My heart was pounding as I unlocked it and scrolled through her messages. Most of them were innocuous, the kind of everyday conversations you'd expect. But then I saw a thread with someone saved as J. No last name. The messages weren't outright incriminating, but they were off. Things like, "Can't wait to see you again. Last time was amazing." And her reply, "You always know how to make me feel special." My stomach dropped. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just a friend, someone being playful. But deep down, I knew better. I kept scrolling, but there wasn't enough context to figure out who Jay was or what their relationship really was. The one thing I knew for sure, Melissa wasn't being honest with me. That night, I lay awake next to her, my mind racing. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I needed more than a hunch and some vague texts. Confronting her without solid proof would just give her the chance to lie her way out of it. The next day, I told my sister Olivia about what I'd found. She'd always been skeptical of Melissa. Not outright hostile, but she'd never been her biggest fan either. When I explained everything, Olivia's face darkened. "You need to figure out who this Jay is," she said bluntly. "And you need to do it fast. If she's cheating on you, you deserve to know." It was Olivia who suggested I start paying closer attention to Melissa's schedule. If she's hiding something, it'll slip through eventually. Just don't let her know you're onto her. And so, I did. Over the next week, I started noticing patterns I hadn't before. Melissa always had some excuse for being out of the house: errands, yoga classes, lunch with friends, but she rarely had specifics. When I casually asked about her plans, she'd give vague answers or change the subject entirely. And then there was the gym. She'd started going more frequently lately, which I thought was a little odd given how exhausted she said she'd been feeling. At first, I was happy for her. It seemed like a good way for her to stay healthy during the pregnancy. But now, I couldn't help but wonder, was that really why she was going? That's when I decided to follow her. The gym had always seemed like a harmless place, bright, bustling with activity, and full of people trying to better themselves. I never thought it would become the center of my suspicions. But here I was, sitting in my car in the parking lot, waiting for Melissa to show up. She had told me she was going to a yoga class, part of her self-care routine since the pregnancy announcement. Except her class was supposedly at 7 p.m., and she left the house at 6:15. The gym was only 10 minutes away. Where was she going for the other 35 minutes? When she finally arrived, I felt my chest tighten. There she was, wearing her usual workout leggings and a loose top, looking every bit the picture of someone heading to exercise. But as I watched, she didn't go inside right away. Instead, she lingered by her car, looking around, almost like she was waiting for someone. 5 minutes later, that someone showed up. A tall guy with chiseled features and the cocky strut of someone who knows they're good-looking walked over to her. He was wearing a trainer's uniform, the name tag on his chest clearly displaying Jake. They exchanged a few words, and then he leaned in, closer than necessary for a professional conversation. I felt my hands clench the steering wheel. This was Jay. I watched as they headed into the gym together, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. My blood was boiling, but I forced myself to stay calm. Storming in there wouldn't accomplish anything. If I wanted the truth, I needed more than just my gut instinct. I waited in my car for over an hour, watching people come and go. When they finally emerged, it was clear they hadn't been in a yoga class. Jake's hand lingered on her back as they walked toward her car, and Melissa was laughing at something he said, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in a long time. Then came the moment that shattered whatever hope I had left. Jake leaned down and kissed her. Not a friendly peck or a casual goodbye, a full-on kiss, the kind that made it clear exactly what their relationship was. Melissa didn't pull away. If anything, she leaned into it. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. For a moment, I couldn't even move. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. This was my wife. The woman who had promised to love me, who had just told me we were having a baby. And here she was, kissing another man like I didn't even exist. By the time they pulled apart and Melissa got into her car, I'd made up my mind. This wasn't the time for confrontation. Not yet. I needed to know the full extent of her betrayal. That night, I barely said a word to her. She came home smiling, talking about how great the yoga class was and how she grabbed a smoothie afterward. I nodded along, pretending to listen, but all I could think about was how easily she was lying to my face. I couldn't take it anymore. While she showered, I grabbed her laptop and opened it. My heart was racing, my hands shaking, but I needed answers. And I found them. Her email was still logged in. And there it was, messages exchanged with Jake, confirming everything. Plans to meet up, photos I didn't want to see, and messages that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. One message stood out, "Don't worry. Once the baby's here, I'll figure out how to leave him without losing too much. We'll be together soon." I stared at the screen, the weight of her betrayal crashing down on me. Not only was she cheating, but she was planning to leave me after the baby was born. And worse, the baby might not even be mine. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Melissa and Jake together. The kiss, the texts, the plans to leave me. The life I thought I had was crumbling, and the worst part was the question gnawing at my gut. Is the baby even mine? Melissa's words from the email haunted me. She wasn't just cheating. She was using this pregnancy as part of her scheme. And if Jake was involved, there was a chance the child she was carrying wasn't even mine. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The next morning, I waited for Melissa to leave before I put my plan into action. I'd done some research late into the night, learning about at-home DNA tests and how I could discreetly get a sample from her. I hated myself for doing it, but what choice did I have? Melissa's toothbrush was the easiest target. I bagged it carefully and placed it in an envelope along with a swab of my own. The test kit instructions were straightforward, and within minutes, I had everything ready to send off. Now all I could do was wait. In the meantime, I couldn't let on that anything was wrong. Melissa came home that evening acting like everything was normal, but every smile, every casual conversation felt like a dagger. I wanted to confront her, to scream at her, but I knew I had to play the long game. If I showed my hand too soon, she'd find a way to twist it, and I'd end up the bad guy. The days dragged by. Every moment I spent around her felt like a lie. She was still going to the gym regularly, still texting Jake, and I was still pretending not to notice. But I wasn't idle. One night, while she was asleep, I went back to her laptop. This time, I focused on her photos and cloud storage, hoping to find more evidence. And I did. There were dozens of photos of her and Jake. Selfies at the gym, candid shots at a cafe, and even one of them in a hotel room. The timestamps made it clear this wasn't a recent development. Their affair had been going on for months, maybe longer. But the most damning evidence was in a folder labeled private. Inside were screenshots of their messages, including one that made my blood run cold. Once the baby's here, we can start the next phase. David won't even see it coming. Jake had replied, "Good. He deserves it for being such a clueless idiot. Make sure everything is lined up so we can take what's ours." Take what's theirs? What the hell did that mean? Were they planning to bleed me dry in a divorce? Use the baby as leverage to secure my assets? The more I uncovered, the darker their plan seemed. I backed up everything onto a flash drive. Screenshots, emails, photos, every piece of evidence I could find. If Melissa and Jake thought they were going to blindside me, they were dead wrong. The DNA test results came back a few days later. I remember staring at the envelope, my hands shaking as I ripped it open. Deep down, I already knew what it would say, but seeing it in black and white made it all the more real. The child wasn't mine. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at those words. Every moment of joy I'd felt when Melissa told me she was pregnant had been a lie. She wasn't just cheating. She was carrying someone else's child and trying to pass it off as mine. The betrayal was complete. By the time Melissa came home that evening, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to expose her for what she was. But not yet. Not until I had everything in place. After the DNA test results confirmed what I feared, that the baby wasn't mine. Everything about Melissa became unbearable. Every smile she gave me, every casual conversation, every plan she made for our future felt like poison. But I wasn't just dealing with her infidelity. As I dug deeper into her messages and plans, I realized this wasn't just about cheating. It was about a calculated betrayal. Melissa and Jake weren't just having an affair. They were conspiring against me, and the stakes were far higher than I had imagined. One evening, while Melissa was out, probably with Jake, I revisited her laptop to see if there was anything I'd missed. Sure enough, there were new messages between her and Jake. They weren't just discussing their relationship. They were planning how to leave me once the baby was born. In one message, Jake wrote, "The timing has to be right. We don't want him getting suspicious before we can lock in the financials." Melissa's response chilled me. "He's already so distracted with the baby shower. Once the baby's here, I'll make the move. He'll never see it coming." But the most horrifying part was Jake's next message. "Don't let him forget the life insurance policy. That's going to be key once you're out." I sat there, stunned, as the full weight of their plan hit me. This wasn't just about taking my money in a divorce. They were planning to use my life insurance, meaning they didn't just want me out of the picture. They wanted me gone, permanently. I felt sick. My wife, the woman I'd spent years loving and trusting, was plotting with another man to destroy me. And Jake wasn't just some random affair partner. He was a predator, manipulating Melissa to get what he wanted. I didn't know how far she was willing to go, but I wasn't going to stick around to find out. I needed more evidence. If I was going to confront her, I had to be ready for anything. That's when I decided to reach out to Mark, an acquaintance of Jake's I'd remembered from some of their social media photos together. I found him on Instagram and sent him a casual message, pretending to be interested in some of his gym routines. It wasn't long before he responded. Mark was chatty, and it didn't take much to steer the conversation toward Jake. "Jake's a good trainer," Mark said, "but he's always up to something. You know he's been messing with one of his married clients, right?" I played dumb. No way. Who? Mark didn't hesitate. Her name's Melissa. I'm surprised her husband hasn't figured it out yet. Jake's been bragging about how they're gonna hit it big after she leaves him. Leaves her husband, you mean? Mark laughed. Nah, dude. They've got this whole plan. She's supposed to drain the guy dry first. Jake's always got some scam going. Bingo. I offered Mark a little cash in exchange for details, and he didn't disappoint. He forwarded me screenshots of Jake bragging about the affair, his plans with Melissa, and even some receipts for expensive dinners they'd shared. Expenses Melissa had likely claimed were for work meetings. Mark clearly had no loyalty to Jake, and I wasn't about to complain. With this new evidence, I had everything I needed. It wasn't just about Melissa cheating anymore. It was about exposing her lies, her greed, and her betrayal in the most public, undeniable way possible. That night, I sat down with Olivia and laid it all out for her. The affair, the fake pregnancy, the life insurance plot, and the plan to bleed me dry. She listened in stunned silence before shaking her head. She's a monster, Olivia said. You can't let her get away with this. I won't, I replied. But I need to time this right. Together, we started planning. Melissa had already set the stage with the baby shower, her perfect, Instagram-worthy celebration of a pregnancy that wasn't even real. It was the ideal opportunity to pull the rug out from under her. She wanted an audience? I'd give her one. Over the next week, I gathered every piece of evidence. The DNA test results, the screenshots of her text with Jake, the photos Mark had sent me, and even a recording of my conversation with him. By the time the shower rolled around, I was ready. Melissa thought she was playing me, but she had no idea who she was dealing with. As the baby shower drew closer, I felt a mix of rage, determination, and oddly enough, a sense of calm. Melissa had no idea what was coming. For weeks, she had strutted around the house, basking in the attention and excitement over our baby, while I silently built the case to expose her for who she truly was. The shower was set to be a big event. Melissa had insisted on inviting everyone. Her family, friends, co-workers, and even Rachel, the friend who had unknowingly tipped me off in the first place. Melissa's parents, Eleanor and Gregory, were especially excited, eager to celebrate their first grandchild. They were traditional and proud people, and the fallout from what I was about to reveal was going to crush them. I worked with Olivia to finalize every detail of the plan. She helped me organize the evidence into a presentation that no one could refute. The DNA results were front and center, alongside the text between Melissa and Jake, the incriminating photos, and even a recording of my conversation with Mark. Olivia, ever the strategist, suggested I wait until Melissa was at the height of her smug confidence during the event before dropping the hammer. Let her dig her own grave, Olivia said with a wry smile. She'll be so busy soaking up the attention that she won't see it coming. The night before the shower, Melissa was practically glowing as she went over the final details. She was surrounded by baby-themed decorations, gifts, and party favors. Watching her laugh and gush about the event made my stomach churn, but I forced a smile and played along. This is going to be perfect, she said, looking at me with that practiced sweetness. I'm so glad we're doing this together. Me too, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Inside, I was seething. The day of the shower arrived, and Melissa was in her element, flitting around the venue like a queen greeting her loyal subjects. Everyone complimented her on how radiant she looked, how happy and glowing. I stayed in the background, letting her bask in the limelight. If she noticed my silence, she didn't mention it. When it was time for the toast, Melissa nudged me forward. Say something sweet, she whispered, flashing me a saccharine smile. I stepped up, holding my glass aloft, and the room fell silent. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to stay calm. First off, thank you all for being here to celebrate this incredible milestone. I began, keeping my tone warm and heartfelt. Melissa and I have been through so much together, and this baby, this miracle, is something we've dreamed about for years. Melissa beamed, her hand resting protectively on her belly. I let the moment hang for just a beat too long before continuing. But sometimes, dreams aren't what they seem, I said, my voice hardening. Sometimes, the people you trust the most are the ones who betray you. The room shifted uneasily. Melissa's smile faltered, and she shot me a confused look. You see, I continued, turning to face her directly, I've recently discovered some things about my wife that I think everyone here deserves to know. Her face paled, but she quickly recovered, laughing nervously. David, what are you talking about? This isn't funny. I ignored her. From my pocket, I pulled out the DNA test results and held them up for the room to see. This is a paternity test. It proves that the baby Melissa is carrying isn't mine. A collective gasp swept through the room. Melissa froze, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Before she could respond, I placed a tablet on the table in front of me and tapped the screen to start a slideshow of evidence. Here's what else I've found, I said, as the screen displayed screenshots of her text with Jake. For months, Melissa has been having an affair with her gym trainer, Jake. Here are their messages, their photos, and their plans to leave me once the baby was born. The room erupted in whispers and shocked murmurs. Eleanor, Melissa's mother, looked like she was about to faint, while Gregory clenched his fists, his face turning crimson. Melissa finally found her voice. David, stop this right now. This is insane. None of this is true. Really? I asked, my voice cold. I turned to the next slide, showing a photo of her and Jake in a hotel room, his arms wrapped around her. Care to explain this? The silence was deafening. Rachel buried her face in her hands, muttering, "Oh my God, I knew it." Eleanor stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Melissa, she said, her voice trembling with rage, "Is this true?" Melissa burst into tears, switching gears from anger to desperation. Mom, it's not what it looks like. David is twisting everything. He's trying to make me look bad. But the evidence was irrefutable. One by one, the people in the room turned against her. Rachel looked horrified, muttering apologies to me for not saying something sooner. Eleanor and Gregory were livid, openly expressing their disgust. Melissa's carefully crafted facade was crumbling before everyone's eyes. By the time the slideshow ended, Melissa was a sobbing, humiliated mess. I didn't say another word. I walked out, leaving her to face the wreckage she'd created. The baby shower was over, but the storm it unleashed had just begun. After I walked out, I left Melissa to deal with the aftermath of her lies, deceit, and public humiliation. From what Olivia told me later, chaos broke out the moment I exited the room. Melissa's parents, Eleanor and Gregory, were livid. Eleanor, always fiercely protective of the family's reputation, tore into Melissa for her actions. "How could you do this?" she'd shouted. "To your husband, to us, to everyone who trusted you." Gregory, usually the quieter one, had spoken only a few words, but they cut deep. "You've destroyed everything, Melissa." Rachel, the same friend who had unknowingly tipped me off in the first place, was beside herself with guilt. She kept apologizing to me afterward, texting to say she wished she'd confronted Melissa earlier instead of brushing it off. It didn't matter much now. The damage was done. By the time I got home, Melissa wasn't far behind. She stormed in, her makeup streaked from crying and her voice trembling with fury. "How could you humiliate me like that?" she yelled, slamming the door behind her. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stared at her, incredulous. "What I've done? You cheated on me. You lied about the baby. You planned to steal my money and leave me in the dirt. Don't you dare try to make me the villain here." Her tears started again, but this time they weren't from anger. They were from desperation. "David, please," she said, her voice breaking. "It wasn't like that. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Jake, he manipulated me. I didn't know what I was doing." "Save it, Melissa," I said coldly. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You were willing to destroy me to get what you wanted. And for what? Some idiot trainer with abs and a smug grin?" Her excuses and pleas continued, but I didn't care anymore. I'd heard enough. I packed a bag that night and left the house. I wasn't going to spend another second under the same roof as her. Olivia offered me her guest room, and I gladly accepted. Melissa called and texted nonstop, but I ignored her. The next step was clear: divorce. The fallout extended beyond our marriage. Word spread quickly about what had happened, thanks to the guests at the shower. Melissa's carefully constructed image as a loving wife and soon-to-be mother crumbled overnight. Her parents disowned her, refusing to speak to her after the betrayal. Rachel and several of her other friends cut ties, too, unwilling to associate with someone who could stoop so low. As for Jake, his life wasn't looking much better. Thanks to the evidence I'd collected and shared, his professional reputation took a massive hit. Clients dropped him left and right, and rumors about his relationship with Melissa spread through the gym community like wildfire. From what I heard, he'd started avoiding the gym altogether, unable to face the judgment and gossip. Despite the chaos, I was resolute. I filed for divorce the very next day, ensuring that every detail of Melissa's actions was documented. The DNA test results, the affair, the financial schemes, all of it was laid out in the paperwork. I wanted no room for her to twist the narrative or come after me for anything. Olivia stood by me through it all, helping me navigate the legal process and keeping me focused on moving forward. "You've got this," she said more times than I could count. "She's not going to win." And she was right. I was determined to rebuild my life without Melissa, without her lies, and without the baggage she had brought into our marriage. Filing for divorce was the first step toward reclaiming my life, but the weeks that followed weren't easy. The process was draining, both emotionally and financially, and Melissa wasn't making it simple. Despite being caught red-handed, she still tried to negotiate for a settlement that would leave her with a significant portion of my assets. It was laughable and infuriating. My lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Amanda, made sure Melissa didn't get her way. Armed with the mountain of evidence I'd collected, Amanda tore apart every baseless demand Melissa made. From the DNA test results to the screenshots of her affair with Jake, we had everything we needed to ensure Melissa wouldn't walk away with a dime more than she deserved, which wasn't much. Melissa didn't go down without a fight, though. She showed up to one of the mediation meetings with crocodile tears, claiming that she'd made mistakes, but still loved me and wanted to make things right. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. "Melissa," I said, cutting her off mid-sob story, "you didn't just cheat on me. You lied about a pregnancy, plotted to take my money, and conspired with someone else to ruin me. There's no coming back from that." Her face twisted into a mask of anger, and she spat back, "You're just bitter because I finally found someone who makes me happy." I didn't bother responding. At that point, there was nothing left to say. The divorce proceedings weren't the only fallout Melissa had to face. Word of the baby shower confrontation had spread far beyond our circle of friends. Her family's disapproval was just the beginning. Eleanor and Gregory, once proud of their perfect daughter, refused to support her in any way. Melissa's mother even sent me a heartfelt apology letter, expressing her shame and disappointment in Melissa's actions. Rachel, who had been one of Melissa's closest friends, distanced herself completely. She told me later, "I just can't believe she would do something like this. It makes me question everything about our friendship." As for Jake, his life had taken a nosedive as well. Mark's loose lips ensured that everyone in Jake's professional circle knew about his affair with Melissa and the schemes they had cooked up. Jake lost most of his clients and eventually quit his job at the gym. Rumors swirled that he tried to start fresh in another city, but even that didn't seem to work out. I'd heard through the grapevine that Melissa and Jake weren't even together anymore, which didn't surprise me. Their relationship had been built on lies and selfishness. It was doomed from the start. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding. Olivia was my rock, constantly reminding me that this wasn't the end, just a painful new beginning. She helped me sell the house, which held too many bad memories to keep. With the proceeds, I moved to a new city where I could start fresh. Adjusting to life without Melissa wasn't easy. Some days, the weight of the betrayal hit me like a freight train. I'd think about all the moments we'd shared, the laughter, the plans for the future, and wonder how I'd been so blind. But therapy helped. My therapist, a calm and patient man named Dr. Reynolds, guided me through the mess of emotions I'd been carrying. "David," he said during one session, "you're allowed to grieve what you thought you had. But don't let that grief define you. Use it to grow, to learn, to build something better." I took those words to heart. Slowly but surely, I began to heal. I focused on my work, dove into new hobbies, and reconnected with old friends who reminded me of who I was before Melissa's lies consumed my life. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories on the channel.